This is really appropriate. I was looking for some funny ways to try to help lighten our sense of like investigating mind. And I found a little funny cartoon. Two meditators sitting next to one another. It's giving the thought bubble of what's going on. And one says, meditation is too hard. How do you keep one thought in your mind for this long? And she's like this. And then the other one is like this, smiling, eyes closed, very happy, dinner. Right, pretty cute. And then there's another one here where, you know, all these students are sitting with the teacher and they're looking to him for answers, and there's a student who's asking, I'm meditating on my inability to meditate due to the fact that when I meditate, I can't stop thinking about how I can't meditate because I'm thinking about my inability to meditate. Is that correct?
That's really cute.
Right. So I like being able to remember like the lightness of our mind is, and that there's humor almost in the way that these, if we can just begin to sense into it, like, oh, that's my mind. It's a funny place up there. Or bring some lightness, bring some humor, bring some compassion to like, that's just the nature, right? And everybody's nature has its own quality of the way it's unfolding. And our practice is about waking up to what our immediate experience of the one we're in is, right? So that's one way to begin to, right, skillfully work with meeting your mind. So in our practice tonight, and you were each kind of naming a little bit about what was arising for you as you were meeting thought, but there are kind of three general areas that tend to happen. So the first one is kind of random, vague thought. Like, oh, it's a plane. Oh, what am I going to have for dinner? Oh yeah, I did that earlier today. What am I going to do later this week? It's just kind of got a very arising, vague, but kind of popcorny is how I kind of see that nature to it. And so this is kind of the clutter. It's just like, and often you might sense that when you first sit down to practice, right? It's what's kind of usually arriving with you into practice, and it might feel a little bit popcorny. And we can investigate that. We can actually like begin to just notice kind of the, and here it goes. Right? And we don't need to do anything with it, and often we're not. We're just kind of randomly taking in information. So that's one type of thought you might want to begin to investigate. And the skillfulness in that is to just allow it to be left alone. Because ever notice how those popcorns turn into something? I'm thinking about what I'm going to do later this week. Oh, I need to make a list. That big project that's coming due. And then we move into itemization, right? Planning, figuring out, going through the step-by-step process that we'll need to go into. And then what happens moves into this other type of thought where we're chasing, right? And you were mentioning that earlier. It's like, oh, and I'm going to chase because I can do something about that thought if I think all the way out. Or I'm thinking all the way out, and I get to the point where it's like, oh, I don't want to have to deal with that. And then we avoid, and we go back to, what's the plane that's happening outside? Right, we avoid, like we begin to push away thought that feels challenging. So practice with either one of those. So what's kind of like the charge of thought that we launch into and want to follow, or the thought that comes in that we go, oh thanks, don't want to think about that right now, is to begin to, as we were just talking about, like lean into the nature of the charge. Feel the charge. Feel that sense of like, oh, I'm being compelled. I'm being pulled. I'm following. I'm wanting. I'm like, notice the felt nature of the way the mind and the body is almost compulsively moving towards once we get in that stream. And the opposite is true if it's like agitation or aversion to the thought process, how much we contract or we pull away, we distance ourselves, we get closed, we get tight, right? That's the skillful process of investigation of thought, right? Not to get caught in the story and the grasping nature, to see, oh, story is really happening and I am compelled. What does compelled feel like? Or, I hate these thoughts. I wish they weren't here. What's the nature of what that contraction around it feels like? And that begins to give us a greater sense of, that's what's here in thought and the way it's unfolding. And the last one that tends to come up, and there was a little bit of this that you all were sharing, was the judging and the comparing thoughts. Right? So what happens when that comes online is I really wish that I could do this better, and I really thought that I had a handle on this, but I clearly don't. And I wonder if this person next to me is really getting it, or am I getting what they're saying, right? This nature, and then you start to follow the train of, there's something wrong with me, doubting myself, questioning myself, right? And it becomes this, oh crap, what am I doing? How am I doing this? Is it right? Is it wrong? And skillful relationship to this is to just notice it's judging thought. It's just judging thought. And that's where that compassion or that humor or that lightness to go, self, what are you doing again? So I'll share, I had an experience actually yesterday with a situation with work that, it was an email that I got that evoked a fair amount of anxiety. Like, read the email, immediately felt it. Like, all right, that's good. Went on about my day. Well, when I got time to go and sit and practice, what I began to notice that was totally present with this email was the rehearsing of the email, planning of what I was going to say in the email, what the ramifications to what I said in the email would be a day from now, a week from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, right? And as I was able to just catch all of that in my practice, I actually had this moment of like, wow, there's such a tightening around the need to do something about this email. Like, my whole brain actually felt tight. And then as I began to investigate tight in my brain, I was like, wow, look at that. And now it didn't actually go away, but there was this moment of like, oh, that's what your brain does. When it gets information it doesn't know what to do with. And it spins. And there's this beautiful cascade of opportunity to just check in with all of those pieces as the mind was doing its habit velocity, and I was chasing to figure out. And who knew an email was going to give me that opportunity, right? Which, in, less reactive state, was just an email. Right? So there's so many opportunities throughout our day where we can actually catch a glimpse of this, and if we can begin to notice how our practice can skillfully meet these conditions of how the mind is operating and offer a way to turn towards it, maybe we begin to see it differently, relate to it differently, have more choice in the matter, have more ease in the matter, whatever it might be. Okay? So I want to, I have a very funny poem that I just want to offer. It's called The Cookie Thief. Have any of you heard of it? No? Okay. A woman was waiting at an airport one night with several long hours before her flight. She hunted for a book in the airport shop, bought a bag of cookies, and found a place to drop. She was engrossed in her book, but happened to see that the man beside her, as bold as he could be, grabbed a cookie or two from the bag between which she tried to ignore to avoid a scene. She munched cookies and watched the clock. As the gusty cookie thief diminished her stock, she was getting more irritated as the minutes ticked by, thinking, if I wasn't so nice, I'd blacken his eye. With each cookie she took, he took one too. With only one left, she wondered what he'd do. With a smile on his face and a nervous laugh, he took the last cookie and broke it in half. He offered her half as he ate the other. She snatched it from him and thought, oh brother, this guy has some nerve, and he's also rude. Why, he didn't even show any gratitude. She had never known when she had been so galled, and sighed with relief when her flight was called. She gathered her belongings and headed to the gate, refusing to look back at the thieving ingrate. She boarded the plane and sank into her seat, then sought her book, which was almost complete. As she reached in her luggage, she gasped with surprise. There was her bag of cookies in front of her eyes. "If mine are here," she moaned in despair. The others were his, and he tried to share. Too late to apologize, she realized with grief. She was the one that was rude, the ingrate, and the thief. Right. So I think it's just like a beautiful story of what happened, right? Even in like the action of life where the mind goes. So, remembering that these are just our minds. It's just our minds. And we, through our practice and the continued willingness to turn into, gives us the possibility of relating to it a little differently. Okay. So any thoughts about that? Or questions about ways to maybe practice this, integrate it?
I really get that intellectually.
Mm-hmm.
And then before starting this class, I would work those sorts of concepts into my practice with mantras. If I noticed that there was some thought I was obsessing about,
Sure.
I would have a mantra that would change the perspective on the thought. But it's all super analytical.
Yeah.
And this part about moving toward the feeling, I'm going to have to play with that because that is not happening for me yet. I feel like I'm doing a lot of observing, but not judging. The choice part hasn't become clear to me yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that part